In the 20 years New Who has been on the air, we can finally stop guessing if it's that character. Because it finally was that character. Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and welcome back to Sentinel Reviews. Doctor Who, Series 15 / Season 2 continues with Episode 6, the Interstellar Song Contest, written by Juno Dawson. As always, because I do these unscripted, there is a blanket spoiler warning in place in case I decide to talk about spoilers. If you do not wish to be spoiled, Doctor Who currently streams in the UK on BBC iPlayer and streams internationally on Disney+. I'm not going to beat around the bush. At the moment, this is the weakest episode of the season, and when I initially finished, I kind of hated it. And I still have a lot of problems with this episode that we are going to get into. But since watching it last night, if you saw the short I uploaded last night, you'll got a little glimpse into my thoughts. I've kind of cooled a little bit. I don't hate it as much as I used to, but I still do strongly dislike it, and I do still see it as the weakest episode of the season. There was a plot I was going to transition into. As episode 6 of an 8-episode season, this episode really only has one goal. Transition us into the finale. And that's where we get our big ending twist for this episode. Which, okay, I'm just going to say it right off the bat. I'm going to talk about the twist at the end. I have a whole rant about that twist. There was another twist that I thoroughly enjoyed, but that twist, especially because it's a character I like, again, we'll talk about it more. Oh boy, I have issues, let's just say. But let's talk about the other parts of this episode, because this episode has so many problems. First of all, most of the performances are not great. A lot of them, for me, just seem to manage to scrape an acceptable. Virata Sethu is probably the strongest, because this episode does have a very decent focus on Belinda that has been lacking in the previous episodes. And now at this point, episode 6 of 8, I realize most of the reasons why I like Belinda are because of Virata Sethu, because thinking about it now, her arc has just been so inconsistent this season. Some of it is very clearly Russell's fault. Some of it is the fault of this season is only 8 episodes. Like, had there been another episode or two to kind of flesh this out a little bit, that might have helped a little bit. Because remember, in the Robot Revolution, Belinda had this whole thing about the Doctor. She was mad at him for performing a genetic scan on her without her consent. She has this whole thing about him being dangerous. She makes it clear she does not want to be a companion. She wants to get home. And all season, the Doctor has been trying to get her home. And in Lux, for example, it seemed like okay, you're trying to get me home, but if we have to make a detour, I'm willing to be along for the ride. And now that we're all the way here in episode 6, again of 8, it feels like Belinda's arc as a character, independent from the series arc, has just not been handled well. Like, suddenly now, she's all for traveling. She still wants to get home, but she is excited about the traveling in a way that she really hadn't been, or at least was exposited that she hadn't been. It feels like there was another episode planned that was cut. For example, at one point, after something the Doctor does, which we're also going to talk about, or something she sees the Doctor say, she warns one of the side characters of this episode, I have never seen him mad like this before. And if he's this mad, this whole world is going to shake. Gee, Belinda, I wish I could have seen the episode where you learned that. Gatwa gives an okay performance. Again, there is a controversial scene, it appears, where he really gets to shine, and I'll try to talk about that more. But this episode really, again, most of the strengths are our side characters. So, and I only memorized one of them. We have let me break down the plot first. Again, we're just trying to set up the finale. The Doctor and Belinda arrive at the Interstellar Song Contest, which seems to be an evolution of Eurovision. And I'm just going to say that didn't really interest or appeal to me. I know of Eurovision. I know nothing about it. So, like Rylan cameoing here and all of that. It did nothing for me. Like, to the Eurovision fans, I hope you got something out of it, but it just didn't capture me. Let's see. Although the thing that did capture me that I did enjoy was the Graham Norton cameo, just as a hologram. That was fun. I liked Mike and Gary. Like, they reminded me a lot of a Robert Holmes double act. Robert Holmes was a writer for Classic Who. He wrote many stories from the Patrick Troughton era all the way till to the Colin Baker era during his death. Many of the stories he wrote are considered all-time classics. The Deadly Assassin, The Talons of Weng Chiang, racism notwithstanding. The Caves of Androzani, it's considered one of the best Doctor Who stories of all time. The Two Doctors, one of my personal favorites. And something Robert Holmes did is he'd always put in two characters who are kind of meant to be this double act. The way they trade quips with each other, the way they communicate. And Mike, most famously, I think the most famous double acts Robert Holmes ever gave us are Sabalom Glitz and Diver in The Mysterious Planet, and of course, Jago and Lightfoot from The Talons of Weng Chiang. And just Mike and Gary were very reminiscent of that Robert Holmes double act in a very fun way. Cora was another really good character, and this episode's politics are really messy. Because they take a very centrist take on something that really should not be up for debate, that really should not be on a topic that really should not be both sides. There is one side that's right and one side that's wrong, and this episode takes a very centrist take on it. But Cora is where this episode's politics really shine, just as a victim of what's been going on, the things she had to do to feel she had to acclimate into society, and, just never really getting to fit into either society, because one society hates her and the other society, the society she comes from, hates her for abandoning them. They see it as betrayal. Cora, like I said, Cora was really good here. And then we had Karuna Stomwell as sort of the head of the station. I enjoyed her performance. She didn't get a lot to do, but there was just such a subtlety to her that I think worked. Like she was trying to save lives. She wasn't trying to argue with our antagonist. She wasn't trying to save her own skin. She was trying to save people's lives. It was something really subtle that I enjoyed. Gatwa, this is one of his weaker... Did I already talk about Shooty? I think this was one of his weaker performances overall, minus that one scene. But yeah, like I said, this episode just has a lot of problems. The first being its muddy politics. So, the Interstellar Song Contest is hijacked by a race of aliens known as the Hellions, because the corporation funding and sponsoring the Interstellar Song Contest basically robbed resources from the Hellions' homeworld and then destroyed them so they couldn't be regrown. They basically genocided the Hellions. And now the Hellions who witnessed that want revenge, and they have sort of become radicalized and in an extremist group. And this episode kind of has similar problems to Kerblam, the Jodie Whittaker episode Pete McTeague wrote, where essentially a disgruntled employee who was so beaten down by the system essentially became radicalized by his abuse and mistreatment to try and violently take down the system. And Kerblam, of course, said, glory to capitalism. Here, the Interstellar Song Contest is not going that far. But as I said, this whole topic of genocide and cultural erasure and these very heavy topics where, clearly one side is right and one side is wrong, this episode is trying to be centrist about. It never goes so far as to say the corporation is in the right for doing this, but also it never goes so far as to stop vilifying for the Hellions for being so radicalized because of their abuse and mistreatment and genocide. And I know it's kind of become a thing to go, not all blank in whatever situation, but that is something that that was a nuance that we needed that this episode just didn't bother to take. So, and I don't know, because I'm not all that familiar with Juno Dawson as a writer. My biggest frame of reference for her is the, BBC Radio? Jodie Whittaker audio she wrote, Redacted. I think I've experienced some of her stuff here and there. I don't know what went on with this episode. Like, if I had to guess, and I'm not saying this is the case, I'm just saying this is my read on what happened. This feels like a Nightmare in Silver situation. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying this is what it felt like to me. If you're not familiar, Nightmare in Silver was an episode of Doctor Who from the Moffat era. It was a Matt Smith episode, written by known monster Neil Gaiman. But what happened, what's since come to light since that episode is aired, is that it was revealed that Stephen Moffat, the showrunner at the time, basically hijacked that episode and heavily rewrote it so that the episode that aired was completely unlike the script Gaiman wrote. And if I had to guess, I think that is what happened here with the Interstellar Song Contest. I don't think this was Juno Dawson's original idea. I don't think this was her script. I think Davies hijacked and heavily rewrote this. So let's talk about the other thing I liked. The surprise appearance from Susan. And I am so happy that it was Carol Ann Ford coming back to reprise her role. Also, I'm really happy because we did not see this coming. No one, as far as I can tell, because I know there was leaks as well, knew about this. So, after the Hellions initially hijack the Interstellar Song Contest, they destroy the gravity bubble because this is a space station, and eject the entire audience and performers out into the vacuum of space. Also, side note, can we retcon Mavity, please? The first couple of times it was funny. Now it's tedious and annoying. Here. Also, our season finale for this season is called Wish World and the Reality War. Can we please fix Mavity? It's not funny. Sorry. But anyway, as the Doctor is freezing to death in the vacuum of space, he suddenly sees Susan in his mind, calling to him, come back, grandfather, find me. So I think Susan is going to be in the finale, which is a really exciting notion. Like, Susan is one of the things I have wanted to see forever, and I've always wanted it to still be Carol Ann Ford. Because my headcanon is, and I don't know if the expanded universe confirms this or not, Susan is a Gallifreyan. She is not a Time Lady. Like, she never went to the Time Lord Academy. Her and the Doctor left Gallifrey before she could. So she never had her DNA rewritten to become a Time Lady. So, which means Susan does not have the ability to regenerate. So again, just really happy Carol Ann Ford is back. I'm hoping this means, again, because of the whole come find me aspect of her message, that we're going to see her in the finale. So let's talk about the controversial thing now. The Doctor torturing Kid. This is something I've seen some fans kind of get in a tizzy about. One of my friends said they compared it to the reaction to Luke in The Last Jedi. You know, Luke would never do this. This is not the hero I know. We're getting that reaction here. You know, the Doctor would never do this. This is not the hero I know. Before I get into this, because this is something I'm going to target the fandom about, go watch the Jon Pertwee or Sylvester McCoy era. Because this is one of the aspects of the Doctor in New Who that I absolutely hate. And it all comes back to Russell T Davies and going back to his first era, how he did not understand the character. I have ranted about this before. If you're familiar with my channel, you know what's coming. I feel like the majority of Doctor Who fans who are online have only seen New Who. Some of them are branching out and trying Classic Who. Some of them haven't gotten to it yet. That's not the point of this scenario. By only seeing New Who, they've only seen the character as characterized by initially how Russell T Davies laid the groundwork. And of course, other writers, as well as Moffat and Chibnall, have expanded on that character. The problem is the way Davies laid the groundwork for the Doctor, especially in New Who, don't entirely mesh with how the Doctor was characterized in Classic Who. Davies went out of his way to ignore and hide aspects of the Doctor. He has this darker side. He has this shadier side that Davies, and again, Moffat and Chibnall, never, always refused to acknowledge. Like, this is my problem. One of my problems with the Doctor's daughter, that whole the man who never would thing. Because yes, the Doctor absolutely would. It's like the whole gun thing. Let me kind of sum it up like this. It's not that the Doctor hates guns. It's not that he would never use them. It's that he tries to avoid situations where they're necessary. But if he is forced into that situation where they are necessary, he will use them. And we've seen this all the time throughout Classic Who. The Seeds of Death. The second Doctor launched Ice Warriors into the sun. The bulk of the Sylvester McCoy era. And the fact that the fans are so mad about this scene kind of demonstrates how poorly Russell T Davies characterized the Doctor for New Who, because up until now, he refused to acknowledge this darker side of the Doctor. I also remember seeing an excerpt or an interview or something that Ncuti Gatwa, I think it was, said that 15 was going to start leaning into more the Sylvester McCoy side of the Doctor. And this was a good demonstration of that, I thought. But yeah, so let's get into the big thing. The thing that gets us into the finale. Mrs. Flood is the Ronnie. And boy, am I not excited for this finale now. First of all, I'm kind of really sad now that Archie Punjabi is playing the Ronnie. I love Archie Punjabi. Like, she was phenomenal in The Good Wife, so I can see her being an excellent Ronnie. The problem is, Russell T Davies, with the gift of hindsight with all of the Mrs. Flood stuff up till now, the problem is Russell T Davies does not understand this character at all. And I am really worried for what's going to happen in the finale. Like, first of all, let me just say that, again, the Ronnie bi-generated, which I did not like. I had issues with the bi-generation in The Giggle, but, there were aspects of it I could see working, the 15th Doctor continuing, essentially the meta text of the 15th Doctor being a reboot, while, the previous era of New Who, the 14th Doctor, ends. Or the 15th Doctor being the clean slate after the 14th Doctor getting the therapy and the help he said he needed and was getting. And of course, with the giggle, them facing the toy maker who had been warping reality, thus the rules of reality were in flux. Because the 15th the doctors in the giggle said that a bi-generation had never happened before. But now the Ronnie did it. And I am so freaking worried now. Because remember, like I've talked about this in Discord chats with some of my friends. People seem to have forgotten this. After the giggle came out, Russell shared his headcanon on social media. He said that going throughout the classic series, all of the Doctor's regenerations had been bi-generations. And the fact now that the Ronnie had just bi-generated worries me that Russell is now making his headcanon canon. And this is such a terrible idea. But furthermore, going back to how Russell does not understand the Ronnie at all. First of all, let me be clear. Like, again, if you saw my short, you saw me talk about this. I like the Ronnie. I have always wanted her to come back. The Ronnie has kind of been the butt of the joke for a while now because it's kind of become a joke that since New Who has been on, like there's a reason I opened with this. Anytime we had a female antagonist or a vaguely antagonistic coded female character, there was always speculation that she was the Ronnie. But I've always liked the Ronnie. There is such an interesting character there. There's such an interesting idea to this character that I don't think the show itself has ever done well. The expanded universe has done it really well, but the show has not done well. And I don't think Russell is going to be leaning into that at all, which is, again, a worrying notion. Whenever we talk about the Ronnie, we always bring up what the Ronnie is on paper. We always talk about what she is conceptually. She is this cold, amoral scientist, essentially. She goes for scientific pursuits while disregarding ethics. She doesn't care what her experiments harm or who they destroy, as long as she gets results. Results she wanted, results she didn't want, results she didn't expect. As long as her science, as long as her experiments yields results, she does not care. She is icy. She is cold. And we always bring up what the Ronnie is conceptually, because the execution always fails. Like, this is a big problem in her second ever story, Time and the Ronnie. Because whenever we portray the Ronnie, she is just the master. And it... haven't had that happen in a while. And it worries me because it looks like, especially Archie Punjabi's characterization right now, especially what her lines were in this episode, it looks like we are still falling into that trap of just writing the Ronnie as the master. I really want to see that cold, amoral scientist. I want to see that uncaring, unfeeling, just essentially mad genius. And it still looks like we're not going to get that. It's one of the reasons. And then there are other aspects of why I don't think Russell understands the Ronnie. Because as soon as they bi-generate, Mrs. Flood is very subservient to her. Like, as they're bi-generating, she is apologizing profusely to the Archie Punjabi Ronnie. And then, as they leave and the episode closes, the Ronnie says something like, I'm going to show the Doctor true terror, or whatever it is. Some sequel baity lead into the finale line. And Mrs. Flood responds, I already said that. The Ronnie goes, shut up. And Mrs. Flood goes, yes, ma'am. Watch the Ronnie's first story, the Sixth Doctor story, The Mark of the Ronnie. Most people don't like it. I think it's really underrated. I enjoy it quite a bit. The Ronnie teams up with the Master. And she never takes his flack. She constantly butts back against him. She never truly lets him be in charge. And it reaches a point where she herself decides to take charge of the situation, or at the very least establish that they are equals. So again, just having Mrs. Flood be subservient to even her own incarnation does not really make sense with what we know about the character, and has me really worried going into the finale. There is another aspect of the finale that I'm really worried about, because I've started, again, in Discord chats, started seeing people talk about this. There's this idea going into the finale called the Unholy Trinity. And, Russell's has already revealed that the two Ronnies are one leg of the Unholy Trinity. An idea that this season has not laid the groundwork for at all. An idea that the previous season has not laid the groundwork for at all. So we're going to get an idea, it seems like we're going to get an idea that may be important, that may have repercussions, that has not been set up. Oh, one more thing I want to say before I close out. Normally, my problems with Murray Gold as a composer are that he's too bombastic. He just... His music does work for the mood of the scene, for the tone of the scene that it's being played for. It's just the bombast I have a problem with. I've said his music is the equivalent of him grabbing you by the shoulders, shaking you vigorously and screaming in your face, "Feel something, damn it." The track he created and played over the Ronnie's reveal does not work at all. It's so cartoonish and goofy and does not work with the scene at all. So that's where we stand. The Interstellar Song Contest is marred with muddled politics, weak performances, and just does not inspire hope for what this finale is going to be. There are a few bright spots, but not enough to save this. But those are just my thoughts. Have you seen the Interstellar Song Contest? What are yours? Start a conversation in the comments below. And remember to like, comment, subscribe. Click the bell next to subscribe to get notifications when I upload. And in the description box below, you'll find the link to my Bluesky where you can follow me and get updates on the channel. This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and I'll see you guys next time.